What's up, guys, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and answer them here in video format. And if you want to make sure your question hits this show, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I put the question prompt up. I put them up after and before every game to make sure you can ask your pre and post game questions. So keep your eyes out for that and make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're notified so you don't miss out on that. But without further ado, let's jump into this week's questions. We have a lot of them. This first one is from WM Distraction, who says, with Myles being out for 2 straight games, what are the chances that he wins Defensive Player of the Year at this point? It's an uphill battle. Well, not an uphill battle. I think it's going to be an interesting battle because nobody has set the world on fire while he's been out, and this is assuming he comes back for Tennessee. That might not be the case. It's not 100% at all. But if he can come back for Tennessee, and if he does have a big game against Tennessee and a big game against Baltimore, he's right back at the top of that conversation. Right now, he's tied with a bunch of different guys, but if he gets those 2 games, has big games, those are going to be national spotlight games, especially the Monday Night Football game against Baltimore. If he can have some big games there, he'll be right back in the running for the #1 Defensive Player of the Year candidate type stuff here. And he will be awarded that award because, again, in the absence of Myles, nobody has really stepped up to the plate. And that's a big deal, especially since TJ Watt hasn't even played yet because that game's been delayed so often here. And now they're going to be playing it against a Baltimore Ravens team would be less impressive than what you would have thought going into that game. So that being said, I think his chances are still about the same as they were before he went out. And if he can come back and have a couple of big games here against some big-time opponents, that will be huge, and the Browns are going to absolutely need him to do that. The next question comes from Corey Clayton, who says, is it more important to think about the fact that the Browns were pretty close in a game against the Jaguars, or is it important that we are just winning those games? Let me ask you. Is Pittsburgh's 10-0 record sullied because they played a close game against the Cowboys? Because they played a close game against the Eagles? Because they've played many close games, the Denver Broncos as well? Is their 10-0 record not legitimate? Are they not going to be the 1 seed in the AFC because they played close games with not good teams? Is that the case? If the answer is no, then it honestly doesn't matter how much you beat some of these teams by. It only matters that you beat it. You don't want to be Tennessee where you lose to Cincinnati or the Raiders where you lose to the Atlanta Falcons or the Baltimore Ravens where you lose to the New England Patriots, right? That's what you don't want to do. But if you win in like 3 weeks, nobody's going to care or even remember the score of those games. So it absolutely only matters the Browns got that win. That doesn't say we can't dissect the things that went wrong in that game that caused that game not to be as big of a blowout or the blowout that we thought it would be. But it also means that that scrutiny has to come into the context that they won the game and they've won many games like that, and that this team is 8-3. Next question comes from Josh Hooper, who says, hey, Quincy, knowing that we have an analytics-driven front office, what defensive positions do you see being a top priority for the offseason? Defensive line. That's it. That's all defensive line. You can try to do some things at safety. That's going to be more difficult. But what you can do is go crazy on the defensive line. And I expect them to go crazy on this defensive line. They got some young pieces last year. I think they're going to go all out, get Myles some help. Defensive line. That's what the analytics front office is going to try to do. That's what I think they should do, and that's what I would do. Next question comes from Chris the GOAT, who says, hey, Q, with the Browns' defense being so bad without Myles and Denzel against the 1-10 Jaguars, even if one of those two come back, can they stop Derrick Henry and the Titans' offense? Now, again, this defense they had Denzel Ward against Philly, but did not have Myles, did not miss him in that game. This game, they did. It's a very up and down thing. It's about matchups. It's about who's filling it that game and things like that you can't really predict. But, yeah, it should be a concern, right? Because, one, with or without Myles and with or without Denzel Ward, the number one thing that you should be concerned about when you play Tennessee Titans is that you have not stopped the run consistently all year. You have done it in some games. You have done it in others. You have not done it, and it's cost you. And much like the Raiders, the Titans are a team that can control the time of possession. This is what they do. They play a very similar game to the Browns. And if they do that on you, you're screwed. And Derrick Henry is not going to be easy to take down. Now, is he more or less a better type of running back that the Browns are more easily susceptible to, or is he somebody the Browns are going to be able to take down? I have no idea. I have not looked into that situation as much yet. I'll have an answer for you in the later part of this week. But what I do know is that, yeah, that is a concern. Even when Myles is in there, the Tennessee Titans offense is a concern. The question is really going to lean on the offense of the Cleveland Browns. Are they going to be able to put up points with Tennessee? Are they going to be able to smother them? Can they take an early lead and take advantage of the time of possession and take Tennessee out of their game plan? Can they do that? And then if they get a lead, can they hold it? Because, again, Tennessee comeback kids this year, they have come back a ton of times from 10-point deficits. So just because you get a lead on Tennessee don't mean it's over. But if you're the Browns, that's got to be the game plan. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can do that. It's going to be a tough game with or without Myles, with or without Denzel Ward. It would be tough. Not having them makes it an even more uphill battle, but who knows? Maybe they might score quicker because those guys aren't on the field, and that ends up hurting them when it comes to time of possession. I don't know. It could go either way. Football has a ton of variables, especially at this point of the season. Next question comes from Omar Shahid, who says, hey, Q, just would like to say the content has been crazy good this year. Appreciate that, man. But my $1 million question is, do you think Myles will be good to go this week? I put it on the live stream yesterday. I'm going to stick with this. I think it's about 60 to 65% that you'll get Myles Garrett. Now, he has to pass a lot of protocols. He has to pass a lot of tests before he can go on there. But I think he's going to get through it and be able to play. I would hope that's going to be the case. But I honestly have no idea. That's just a random guess here. I'm hoping that's the case, but we'll see. We'll see. Most guys come back, but some people don't. It's going to be nerve-wracking once we get to about Wednesday to see if Myles Garrett's going to be able to return. Hopefully we find out earlier than that. This next question is from DNA Hype, who says, is it just me or do the Browns seem like they play down to their opponents because they realize the Browns didn't have Garrett or Ward, but that should have been an easier win? Yeah, sometimes the Browns play close games regardless. Like, they have not blown anybody out. They're like a terrible team to bet that they're going to cover because they don't ever cover. And sometimes Nick Chubb makes sure of that. But they just haven't done that. It's not this team, right? And I think they do need to have a moment like that pretty soon here. But that's just not what they've done all season. Is it a point of concern? Not really, because Pittsburgh's only like blown out 2 or 3 teams, and they're the number 1 seed in all of football at this point. So it's not like you need to blow out every team, or that blowing out every team makes you a better football team. Having experience in these close game situations actually could be a benefit, because remember, this was a thing with Baltimore last year where they blew out everybody for about 10 straight weeks. They got to the playoffs. They played a close game. By the time they got to the fourth quarter, they looked exhausted. They looked tired. They looked like they didn't know how to win those type of games. The Browns have been in those situations, have won those types of games, have had to come back, make impossible comebacks at the end of games, i.e. The Cincinnati game in Cincinnati. So I think you can see it that way and see it as a positive. But at the end of the day, when it comes to judging these wins, the thing that matters the most is the win. If you don't have the win, you don't have anything. So you need to get the win. Same way when you're losing games. It does not matter that you're losing games by 2 or 3. The 0-16 Browns lost 10 games by like 1 or 2 points. Does that mean that they were a couple of plays away from finishing 10-6? Absolutely not. They were never going to finish 10-6, no matter what the probabilities say they were. They were a bad football team because bad football teams don't win those games. So if we're going to extend that logic to when we have bad teams and not give them credit for losing by 1 or 2 points, we can't say the same thing in reverse about winning by just 1 or 2 points when you should have won by more points. Sometimes bad teams play good and good teams have down games. That's just what it is. In the NFL, where you have relative parity, it's going to happen a lot. Next question comes from Eric Stefani, who says, hey, Big Q, with Ward being out, what adjustments do you think Joe Wood should make in regards to replacing him? Also, do you think he'll be out for 4 weeks like Teller? I don't think he's going to miss 4 weeks because Teller did not finish the game where his calf went out. Ward did. So I think this was more of a cautionary benching where they just didn't put him in because they didn't see the point in risking him against a team that they should have beaten, or at least they knew they should have beaten by a lot more than they did. So I think it's more cautionary than it is because he couldn't physically go. So maybe he's not going to play against Tennessee, but he could come back for Baltimore. Maybe he misses 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't think he's going to miss the full 4 weeks that Wyatt Teller missed. I would be very surprised if that were the case, unless he got injured on that Goddard play, which I don't think that is what happened there. So, no, I don't. As far as adjustments that they can make, there's really nothing you can do. Denzel Ward not being there, Ronnie Harrison not being there, you just got what you got at that point. No Myles, the adjustment you can make is having those guys come off the injury list. And until you can do that, you ain't no adjustment you can really make there. Next question comes from James Day, who says, great show, love the content. Given where the team is today, 8-3, what should be the goal for this team just to make the playoffs or make some noise in the playoffs? Yeah, it's funny how, expectations evolve, right? Because everybody acts as if their expectation at the beginning of the season is just going to hold at the end of the season. It never does. The fact is that now I want to see this. I have always contested, I think this Browns team can win 11 to 12 games and win a playoff game. And that would be a successful season. I would not be upset with that. But again, if it happens in a way that's unsatisfactory, then we're all going to be disappointed. So that being said, I think they do. It would be good for this team to win a game, make a run. And honestly, once you make the playoffs, you don't know how many times you're going to be back there. Jacksonville is a prime example of this. They were in the AFC Championship in 2016. You assume they would have been back a couple more times, given how young and good that roster was, but they never came back to it. Same thing with the Carolina Panthers. Went to that Super Bowl, you assume they'd be back, never came back. So when you're in the playoffs, you gotta go for it all. There is no we'll be back next year. We're going to build off of this. You got to go for it all every time you're in there because you just don't know when you're going to be back. You don't know when things are going to go left. Look at Baltimore. I bet the last thing they expected when they lost that game to Tennessee last year in the playoffs was that they'd be struggling to make the playoffs this year. They didn't expect that. But every year is different. Sometimes things carry over, but a lot of the times it doesn't in the NFL. So when you make the playoffs, you got to go for the main goal. Ain't no plan for next year in the playoffs. You got to go because you never know when you'll get back. Next question comes from Beep Beep Out of the Way, who says, who do you see as the AFC and wild card teams? I don't think the Ravens will make it. I think it's probably going to be the Raiders, the Browns, and maybe the Dolphins. Maybe it's going to be somewhere in that AFC East race. It's either going to be the Dolphins or the Patriots. But it'll be interesting to see if the Patriots can get to 10-6. They've just beat a good Arizona team because if they do, they're going to win the tiebreaker. If it is a tiebreaker with Baltimore, since they won the head-to-head there, it's going to be an interesting thing for that AFC East, right? Because the Dolphins just don't have that tough of a schedule going forward, and neither do the Patriots. And I think the Patriots kind of have the Buffalo Bills number, so they might be able to sneak one of those games out. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Next question comes from Orca Batista, who says, what do you think the odds are the Browns winning out for the rest of the season? Keep up the good work. Your bots will always have your back. Shout out to the bot squad. The Browns have some decent this is the biggest obstacle in their way, in my opinion, of the Browns being able to win out as everything shakes out right now. I know Pittsburgh's still on the schedule, but they could be starting Mason Rudolph and their backups in that game. We don't know. It seems likely that that's going to be the case. And if that is the case, then the biggest thing that you have is this road game against Tennessee. Baltimore has not been as good as they have been in past years. We know what the two New York teams are, and I just spoke about Pittsburgh. So this team, the Tennessee Titans, they're at full strength. They're playing really well. Derrick Henry had a monster game, and same thing for A.J. Brown. So they're playing at full strength. They're really good, and you're playing in their place. Now, they did lose to the Bengals in their place, but they haven't lost that many games in their place or at all this season. So they're a very good team, and this is the biggest thing. If the Browns can get this win, then winning out is very, very possible. right? Because Baltimore, we don't know what they're going to be putting on the field at that point, and we don't know what Pittsburgh's going to be putting on the field in Week 17 either. So your best chance to finish out and do something incredible, like finish 13-3, still get second place, unfortunately, is to win this game. If they win this game, then the chances of winning out have dramatically increased. Right now, they got about a 30 to 40, well, not a 30, I would say about a 45% chance of winning out. But if they win that game, it jumps to like 70, 80. It would be almost more likely that they would win out at that point and really secure their own destiny when it comes to the wild card spot and really be a wild card team that I don't think any division winner is going to want to play. So it'll be interesting to see what the Browns can do there. But that's it for this week's questions. I want to thank you guys for asking them. And again, guys, have a great day and have a good night.